All right, I'd like to call up now the fall athletic summary, please. Evening.
John and I will report on the fall athletic summary. You heard a lot of the names already mentioned earlier, but I'll start with the girls' sports seasons for the fall. Our girls' golf team had a successful record this year, a 6-4, so that was a good improvement from last year. They did have a 2-2 conference overall record. And the girls swimming, again, had a 6-3 overall record. A lot of increase in rigor in their practices and their meets, tougher competition, so we're seeing some better performances. Like we mentioned, we had a state qualifier with Julia. Girls tennis, good record, third place in our Metro Suburban Conference. We were 10-5 overall. And then when we move to, we don't always gauge success on wins and losses, but our girls cross country team, but when we do have wins and losses, you like to note them, obviously. The girls cross country team had an excellent season, first place in their conference. They won their regional. They came in second in the sectional, and their team got to qualify for state, so they all got to participate as a team downstate and placed 12th, which was the highest in the school's history, so that was awesome. And then our girls volleyball, again, had one of the greatest seasons they've ever had, a 32-8 overall record. Won their conference, won their regional, won their sectional, and then went on to a super sectional, and they lost in that, and it was a very, very traumatic kind of ending, but they get almost downstate and had some great success. And as goes with that, usually to the winner go the spoils, and you saw some of the things that Dana was awarded with, and I think will be, I don't know if it's officially announced, Kristen, or not, that she'll Player of the Year in Illinois is going to be a definite situation that'll be coming her way, I think, so that it's going to be a high-level award for her. And I'll let John hit the boys.
Okay, probably overall, boys and girls was one of our most successful fall sports seasons in RB's history. I updated it to the Booster Club last meeting that we had, and we talked about some of the sports and things that they're doing. The boys golf program, new coaching staff, basically a rebuilding type of season for them. The varsity finished in the middle of the pack, and the good future sophomores were 7-4, so moving up. We also had 3 boys qualify for sectionals, which was great for the program. Kids are learning and active, and obviously golf is one of those things that's one of the few lifetime sports that we do offer for boys and girls that you can use, for future business opportunities, and everyone always wants to have a ringer in their foursome. So I think that obviously things can be created through the sport of golf. Boys soccer, successful season, new head coach, did a nice job. Varsity, very competitive, second in the conference to Wheaton Academy, who is traditionally a top program in the state. Good lower levels, good numbers coming through. So we're looking for good, they have good feeder numbers as well, so looking for good things from the boys soccer program in the future. Our football team, you heard Coach Curtin speak tonight, had a successful season. Kind of peaked last year with the group that he had, with the leadership and some of the athletes. Not to say we didn't have talent on the field this year, but some of that leadership sometimes is different in different years. And another playoff season for the football team. Lost in the first round, finished second in conference to state champ ICCP, who probably would have won 3A, 4A, 5A this year. They were that strong. So credit to what Coach Curtin does and runs a classy program. Sophomores and freshmen had good seasons, and looking for good things in the future with our quarterback returning next year and some of our other receivers. And then we finish up with our boys cross country, one of the most successful seasons in the history of RB. They basically won everything that they ran, except the state tournament. They won conference, they won regionals, they won sectionals. They finished 11th at state finals. You heard about Mateo being 16th, but really the team, you probably see these guys not only during the season and the off season running together, keeping the pack going. A good mentality that Coach Forberg and Coach Urick have put together. So all in all, really a successful fall season. Very pleased with them.
Looking at the girls' sports for numbers and how things were going on overall program numbers. Our girls volleyball numbers are usually consistent. We would call they're kind of maxed out. They have always had to cut players, usually on the lower levels and at varsity occasionally. So their numbers are really strong. They're pretty much at the max that they can have. Girls tennis, we have seen a decline from the last 2 years now. We're down into around the 30 range. We were 28. We were 30 last year. And we really feel, the coaches feel there's a direct relationship to not having courts on campus. That's times where extra girls may not be coming because there's a lot more investment with getting transported back and forth, and again, having the opportunities to play extra matches. When you're renting a facility outside, you rent the ones you need, and then the exhibition or extra matches or a little bit of practice before a match that you could have before teams get here. You don't have those opportunities. So we'll look forward to, obviously, the new facility being put together this spring and summer, so that'll help them. Girls cross country, girls swimming, numbers pretty consistent, maybe up or down one or two, which is obviously anomalies that are going to happen, but they stay pretty consistent. Our swimming, again, we've increased the rigor and what they're doing in practices and competing and having a higher level of competitions is obviously a good thing for the performances, and that sometimes entails having a few less kids here and there, but I think overall they're holding pretty steady, and we'll see a climb in that with our youth continuing to use our pool. And the girls' golf numbers have dipped a little bit this year. We still have a complete varsity level competing. One coach that handles that, but again, that second level is what we're kind of pushing to. But right now, it's the skill of the girls at the lower level is not up to the par that we would hope to get them on the courses. So we're still working at that.
One of the things I'd like to add about the tennis courts, obviously a great thing for the community, a great thing for the high school. In talking about the girls' tennis numbers, the boys' tennis numbers, when kids see a sport and they're active in a sport, they have a tendency to go watch it, go play it. Our PE classes have not been able to play tennis for a few years now. That hurts numbers. I mean, that's just a direct correlation. So I think the more kids that play it in the PE class, it's a good PE curriculum activity. I think you'll see the numbers start to climb, skill level climb, freshmen especially, hook them into something. So I think that you will see that. There's no doubt in our minds. As far as boys' numbers, looking at cross country, pretty consistent from years past. They've been very consistent and active with the kids they get, and been keeping them pretty much for 4 years, which is a good thing. Boys' golf numbers dipped a little bit. We knew they would with the new coaching staff and adherence to good attendance regimen and things that they're doing now. I went and watched 3 or 4 matches, and very good skill being taught, fundamentals of the game, sportsmanship, and all the things that you want. So you're going to see some good improvement coming in the future there with our 2 golf coaches. Football numbers are down, and obviously a lot of things take into consideration in football, particularly the concussion things that are out there, the NFL, all the way down to the high school and feeder school levels, talking about injuries and things like that. It's scaring people off, no doubt. It's not only RB, it's across the board. We're seeing schools in our conference now that are only offering 2 levels of football instead of 3, or 1 level of football instead of 3. So it's a big issue. It's something that concerns us all. And so that's why you see a little bit of dip. Sometimes these numbers go in waves. We're hoping that by more involvement, Coach Curtin started a Bulldog feeder program now this year for the first time. So I think we'll start to see more Riverside, Brookfield kids playing football again.
The West Suburban Gold Conference, which I was a part of when I was at Willowbrook, is down to only having a couple teams having a B football level. So it really is a West Suburban area thing and a high school thing in general, where some of the lower level kids, the numbers are in the 30s instead of 50s where they used to be. So,
as far as soccer, pretty consistent, pretty good numbers. Actually, very good numbers. It's almost saturated at the levels we offer. We talked about now adding a coach for the girls in the spring, additional coach for boys in the fall. We appreciate the board's commitment to those 2 activities, and the numbers have been there to support hopefully running a 4th level in soccer. So there are teams and schools out there to play. While football numbers drop, sometimes you'll see the soccer numbers spike, and that's probably what's happening right now. And that's it for the numbers.
yeah, questions?
There were some questions submitted. Do you want to just touch on those quickly? Kristen or Tom or John? or did you, I don't think you covered them in your presentation, or did you?
One of the questions about the four-year average on the top of the fall participation. I think we discussed the reasons why some of the sports had things down. Again, if you look at that particular chart, has 6 years now, with 1 year, 2014, having a very high level of fall athletes. So if you obviously it's 1 year, it bumped up a lot. I think that was an anomaly again, that taking that out, the average may be closer to 390 for a year. But so I think the decreases we kind of explained in individual sports what happened.
Randy?
The other questions were in regards to the pay to participate fee collected. And so just some clarification there, that's what's collected as the time that we do this board report. So it's not going to be 100% because we have some students that haven't paid yet, and a lot of those students are on payment plans. And so that's why it's not as simple as subtracting the free and reduced lunch students and then multiplying by 200. So that was the 63,000 was what was collected at around December 1st of 2015. And 2016, you can see where we're at. And that represents about 90% of the total pay to participate fees that we expect to collect of the 66,200, which we had already subtracted the number of students that were waived from the total to get the 66, to show that we're about at 90% of our student fees have been recovered.
Any questions on this side?
I want to mention a couple of things, just I know, talk about other colorful issues, some positive things going on in athletics too. Some new implementations that we put in the fall season. We started an athletic attendance incentive for the sports programs to see, tracking our athletes and seeing how much they're coming to school. We talk about 95% attendance rate by the board for our students to come to school. So in the fall, we did a little bit of competition amongst the sports and tracked them from the middle of September to the end of October. And we had a 97% attendance rate for student athletes, which is great. We did a competition with a pizza party. The boys golf team had a 98% attendance rate through the whole fall season. So they're coming. Obviously, if they're coming to school, they're engaged, they're learning, and they're also showing up for their sport and getting a better education and athletic situation. The other things we're doing, we will be tracking our kids at the IHSA offers a team academic award. So at the end of this semester, we'll take their varsity GPA, and if they average over 3.0, which I know many of our varsity sports will, they'll be on a plaque that we'll create, and that'll be hanging up down in the athletic area about the teams that qualify for that award. And then the other thing is just the Booster Club. I just want to give you a little update. I know some of the things in past board meetings were regarding what are the boosters doing, how's it going. Over 200 plus membership now. We have a new website, so you can go on and see it. I'm sure Dr. Skink has probably told you about. We do have the minutes, the agendas, the financial statements. Online membership can be done now, so we're seeing a nice, every sport, 26 sports are represented at the Booster Club, and we're getting a good 30 plus at the meetings, and that tops our 3 that we had last year. And then Chick-fil-A has been a good partnership with us right now. They're giving quite a bit of product out for our hospitality rooms for tournaments. You might have saw their sign down in the athletic area because of all the free donations they've been given. They feed every sports team at least one time during their season, sometimes our opponents, and then our boosters are selling their product every once in a while through our concessions. Just some new things happening, so.
All right, so any questions on this side?
Yeah, I got a couple. The ISHA came out a couple years in advance to say that they're going to have lacrosse become a sport so that schools can plan budgets and look forward planning. What has the athletic department done, other than to dump it as a club sport, to plan, to present to the board potential budget concerns, whether they want to offer the board an opportunity to make it a sport here? What has the athletic department done?
Well, we've obviously had discussions with Dave, and we went through the process of meeting with some of the interested parties. Normally, a situation where you start a new sport like that, you go through a trial period, which is customary in most schools, it is here, is that you go through and establish some kind of data, some kind of track record of who's going to be coming out, how many kids, what's going to be needed. and then have obviously resources allocated down the road if it becomes an official sport, which lacrosse, again, just came out with that the state's going to start, next year doing that. And it usually takes, like I said, some time to see what and who will be there because there's a lot of, variables that go with that. So we've been working with starting it up as a club or
I
a.
did see one of our agenda items was to open a bank account for them, or at least an account.
Correct. Dave, Mr. Manning, do you want to step up to the table for a minute? We've put them on our 2-year process, so where they start off as a club. Can you explain how often you've met with them and what you've worked on with them? I know you've assigned some funding to them through your activity account process.
Correct. Starting this from scratch, we first included them in our activity fair in the fall. And so we wanted to see what the involvement or the engagement level was from our student body. And we had over 100 signatures that we collected. It doesn't mean that all 100 are going to be out there, but they are interested in it. So from that, then we have held weekly meetings with our student group that really is driving force of this. And through those weekly meetings, we started from nothing or all the way to now looking at, on a club level, we completed a grant that we're going to hear back hopefully on Friday to fund 20 sets of equipment for both of our girls and boys, which is a full set of equipment. Lacrosse itself is a very expensive sport, so there will be additional funding coming from the activity account. It is a pay to participate because it is a competitive program, so that'll fall under our competitive activity category. So some of that money collected will go towards funding for the lacrosse club.
But you realize a lot of sports are, if you go ask girls softball players how much their parents are paying them to be in leagues, $1,400 a year. You go ask baseball players if they're playing competitive leagues, how much they're paying a year. So, all these sports are expensive when the parents pay out. I'm just, and I understand there's equipment involved, but I guess if it's a, ISHA is coming through as a sanctioned sport, shouldn't the athletic department be somewhat involved with it? And to say the ultimate goal is it's going to fall under their umbrella down the road?
I could answer some of that from past history. My previous district, lacrosse, obviously an upcoming emerging sport as considered by the IHSA. We know it's going to become a regular sport in 18-19, but that doesn't mean that every school in the state of Illinois is going to add lacrosse. First of all, you got to show numbers, which Mr. Mann talked about a little bit, but also typically what it does, and in the Glenbard district, it started out as a club because you have to establish numbers. You do play other competitive clubs and get an idea of the kids are going to stick around with it. Typically, you like to have 2 levels so the board just doesn't approve it and all of a sudden the next year it's dead because half the kids graduated. So you should have a varsity and a JV feeder to get it going. And if that can be established, then it becomes the athletic department that now works with the activity department, and we start to promote this thing, and then you start to play the schools that do offer it, which they get sanctioned in an LAX league and things like that, which I know all the process is going. And it's the right steps. I mean, RB's doing the right steps. It's exactly what you do. But we really can't touch it until it's established, until it's going, until we see now that they got the close to 2 levels. I mean, because you don't want to see in 2 or 3 years we don't have the kids anymore, we don't have a coach anymore. It's got to be something you can provide the
Did we
numbers
sign
to.
the emerging sport? We did, correct?
Yeah, there's an IHSA.
So that means they can play other teams that are either clubs, well, everybody's a club right now, right? Because there's no IHSA.
Correct.
But by us signing that, if they wanted to scrimmage a Nazareth or somebody, we can do that, right?
Correct. You can
And
play
we're-
Glenbard West and those people now. as a
And we're
club
playing
status.
under the IHSA guidelines that they set up that will be taken into consideration into effect here next spring 2018.
So right now, we just have nothing but signatures, and we're gonna start, we had 1 workshop that we allowed the field and stuff to be used.
Yeah,
And then
we're
this
gonna have-
spring, we're starting to
I
work.
I signed them up for many nights in the field house. They've got maybe 15 days and nights that they've signed up for, so I think they'll have a better gauge on what, and obviously some of the kids that want to do it might be in a winter sport can't do it right now, but, you know, that will show. So.
So the transition will be how many from the petitions start to
And they're
participate?
both, boys and girls are both spring sport activities too. Typically is our highest activity period in most high schools, because you offer more sports, so.
So where did you get these numbers? Are there athletes that are walking the halls that started to play lacrosse that weren't participating? Were there more hockey kids? What numbers did you see at the Glumbards?
Same type of thing. I mean, they start out, kids with the petitions, brought it forward, and then you check through it and actually go to those kids and say, hey, are you really serious? Because sometimes kids, it sounds good, and they follow through with it, or some don't. Some are already in a spring sport, but just like the idea of having it. So you got to make sure you get your ducks in a row somewhat, so you can at least, like I say, have a strong varsity level and then somewhat of a feeder program, you know, to back it up for the future years.
Because there will be
So-
some purging of other sports, so all that, the other people have time to adjust to if kids are leaving their sports or coming in. And again, the lists are preliminary, but I think the state's had about 10 years of trying to let the schools work on emerging and getting enough schools, and they finally decided, what was it, April 19th of this year, that they would then, you know, try to have everybody apply and see how many apply. So they still don't know how many will apply, but they're hopeful that it'll be over the 60 that they need, which, for the boys.
When do those numbers come out?
They'll be applying for as coming in the spring here.
So they have to declare that they're moving from an emerging to a board-sponsored?
Right, to create you know, to be an
I
IHSA
remember
member.
at Bartlett, I signed as in '09 and '10 as the principal. And so that's already 8 years ago. So it's been an emerging sport for over 10.
You can still be, obviously, it would be a sanctioned sport after April 19th, whatever they're going to say you have to sign up by, but you can still participate even not being a board-sponsored sport, because the parents at Glenbard West paid for it for 4 years before the board took it on, and now the board is paying for that sport. They can still participate against other high schools, but the parents paid for 4 years. That was just
Kinda like
Glenbard's.
hockey.
Well,
Similar
hockey is
to
a
hockey?
separate entity. That'll never be an IHSA activity, so, but it's similar in the cost factor and things like that. The board doesn't take on hockey costs. They never do.
So one of the concern that we want to just make sure the parents that are watching or that this can get out, one, the board hasn't made a decision. We use a 2-year process here. There's a 2-year process in our contract. So I'm sure the question's generated from, we don't want to get to the end of this 2 years, and if there is this, if the numbers on the petition turn out to be the numbers on the field for the next 2 years, we want to make sure we're staying on top of this, so that recommendations can be provided and updates can be provided to the board accordingly for the board to consider formalizing this 2-3 years down the road. I think that's the main concern. But we have done a lot. I know you work on a regular basis with that parent group. We were getting information. We just found out we might be getting the grant, or you're not sure yet.
We'll find out on Friday. Just starting from nothing and where we're at right now, just scheduling practices and potentially having some opponents. Because we signed the emerging document, it allows us to schedule out in a club nature, because everyone's in that same category right now, but now we have the opportunity to play under some of the guidelines that the IHSA will be coming forth with. Come a long way, and I think, you know, there's still a lot of room to grow here. Looking at our drill day, we had about 40 kids out there. You know, and that's just from coming from that fall activity fair to now 40 kids out on the field practicing and building those skill levels. So there's a lot of room to grow, a long way to go here, but we'll find out Friday if, you know, some of that funding will come through to help us really establish equipment needs and things like that.
Maybe this isn't the right time because you're not prepared. 'Cause I read a couple articles about the hockey and now this. I mean, I don't understand the color of who's running it, who's liable for it. You know, is it covered by our insurance? How do you get a coach? If you're getting a grant for the equipment, is the school gonna own the equipment? So that if we do go into sport, we already have it?
Correct.
Who we getting a grant from?
It's through the Illinois Lacrosse Association, and they basically will donate the equipment because.
And we go through a pretty rigorous process, the athletic directors to recommend to us who was gonna coach sports every year, and now we're gonna put maybe 100 of our students in the sport, and how do we know who the coaches are? How do we know who's vetting the coach?
It goes.
So we vetted the coach, correct?
Correct, and it goes through the, our protocols for hiring here.
So there'll be a presentation for the board on who the volunteer coach will be for that sport at some point?
For that club.
For that club?
Yeah.
It's still a sport, whether you call it a club or IHSA.
Club
right?
sport, right.
Correct.
Okay.
All
And
right,
then,
any other questions?
okay.
Thanks a
So-
lot. Oh,
I just want to make sure, I know there's a large group of parents that are advocating for this. We're following an administrative, so we're going in a 2-year cycle. We're working it through the club, we're opening an activity account today, so we're treating it no differently than we've added levels for golf. We're looking at levels for girls' water polo, we're giving them a 2-year cycle to show consistent participation numbers. We're treating it the same way. I'm assuming that question though is coming from, if this continues to grow, that we have plans and steps in place so that in 2-3 years, if this is ready to become a sport, we're not playing reaction, we're proactive in our planning. Okay?
all right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Wait. Possible question. Kevin, do we have any update on the conference affiliation that we could share with the board, or did we put that on hold?
So the South Suburban Athletic Conference, the board was provided that update. They have elected not to expand at this point in time. We're still a member of the Metro Suburban. There is some informal discussions that pieces of the Metro Suburban could be breaking off. There's 2 or 3 conferences out west that are splitting apart and starting their own conferences. So right now, we have no formal invitation. We have fielded some questions with principals and other superintendents about possibly exploring opportunities, but we have no set plan or meetings yet. So we're still Metro Suburban for now.
Okay, anything else? Thanks, guys, appreciate the report.
Thank you.